How bad have polls gotten for Joe Biden? Well, according to new reporting, he is angry to the point of shouting and swearing at aides during a January meeting about low poll numbers in Michigan and Georgia. This is according to a lawmaker who told this to NBC News on condition of anonymity. So NBC reported yesterday that Biden was seething after being told that states he narrowly won in 2020 are slipping out of his grasp due to his handling of the crisis in Gaza. Biden's 38% approval rating compares quite poorly to the last three presidents to lose their re-elections, including Jimmy Carter, who had a 43% approval rating, George H.W. Bush, who had a 39% approval rating, and Donald Trump, who had a 48% rating in 2020, which is 10 points higher than Biden's current numbers. Business Insider also reported that Biden has resisted in conversations with the aides, trying to prevent him from going public or going to public events where he could misspeak or trip up. Meeting voters and changing minds has also been made more challenging by persistent protests that have repeatedly disrupted Biden events. Now, as we reported earlier this month, Biden is avoiding college campuses, and the Washington Post covered the persistent ceasefire protests again today, noting that Vice President Kamala Harris's motorcade faced calls of Genocide Joe and Butcherer Biden as they waved Free Palestine and Save Gaza signs, and that her event itself was interrupted as well.
Now, protests have been often characterized as left-wing in nature, including by Biden in a recent sit-down with Jonathan Capehart a couple of weekends ago. But a Data for Progress poll from the end of February shows that 83% of Democrats support a permanent ceasefire with the release of Israeli hostages, along with a clear majority of Republicans and independents as well. Now, some commentators disagree that Biden's low approval numbers are rooted in reality. Bill Maher weighed in over the weekend saying that Biden's ratings are in the toilet because he's doing a bad job, but because many Americans like living with their heads in the toilet. Let's take a listen.
I've been thinking a lot lately about a puzzle many are struggling with. Why are Biden's approval ratings so low when things are generally pretty good? Now, of course, there are problems. America's a big place, but wages are rising, unemployment is negligible, the stock market is soaring. We somehow brushed off both the Trump presidency and the pandemic. Yes, inflation persists for a lot of things, but, you know, an actual good, nice-sized TV now costs $60. Who gets credit for that? We've got next-day shipping, stuffed crust pizza, legal weed, GPS, and porn on the phone. Cheer the f*** up.
All right. Look, Bill Maher has occupied a really interesting political space over the last couple of years or so. He's someone who I think has gotten a lot more traction with kind of independent and right-leaning audiences, often spoken in the same breath as people like, Elon Musk and other kind of counterculture figures. But he seems to be on the firmest ground with that cohort when he's talking about cultural issues, less so when he's talking about economic issues. And certainly, I think, when he's talking about, not in this clip, but elsewhere, about Gaza and Biden's handling of it.
He remains kind of normie and does not like Donald Trump and does not want Donald Trump to win. So whoever is not Donald Trump is who he wants.
Right.
And that happens to be Joe Biden. So I do appreciate a lot of Bill Maher's commentary, as you say, unsurprisingly, on cultural issues, on cancel culture, on free speech, etc. But he's covering for Biden because he wants Biden to be reelected.
So back to this top line story. Biden apparently, back in January, was so angry about the poll numbers that I guess were newish back then, showing him really flagging on some of these crucial swing states. They started shouting at aides, is resisting aides' attempt to keep him from going into public events where he could create, frankly, more work for those aides as they try to clean up some of these missteps that he's had more recently. And it does seem like perhaps this, now that we know this information, this is newly reported information, even though it's about back in January, this does seem to lay the foundation for some of the policy shifts and the rhetorical shifts that we've seen since then with respect to how they're talking about a ceasefire. It was a word that was completely anathema to the administration until recently. So you had that rhetorical shift there, and now some of the reporting about Chuck Schumer coming out, giving that speech last week, and an attempt to distance the Biden administration from the Netanyahu campaign. I think the only question going forward is this going to be enough, especially since it seems like Joe Biden can't do the sort of retail politics that he was once known for, going to college campuses, speaking directly to the public. Ultimately, even if I believe Bill Maher is wrong about his diagnosis of the economy and things are fine and you can buy a big screen TV for $60, so why is anybody complaining? If Joe Biden can't make his pitch about why he's good on the economy, why his position on Gaza is the right one, why he should be reelected because of his own kind of gaffes and because he can't go anywhere without getting shouted down by a crowd, is he going to be persuasive enough to pull himself out of these poll numbers and win an election?
Yeah, look, I think frankly is the reality is that he should not go speak at college campuses given how young people feel about him, but he should be speaking to auto workers. He should be speaking to areas where his Gaza policy is just maybe not that they don't care about that, but not the top line concern of the audience he's speaking to. It sounds like his aides are maybe actually getting in the way of him talking to people more directly, which
you think he should?
Is a bad idea. I mean, he's not going to win if he doesn't. But so it might blow up in his face. But this hiding Joe Biden, not letting him talk to the press or talk to people, is not working. He's in a position right now to lose. They have to shake things up. They have to do something differently. It could be the case that when we hear more from Joe Biden, we like what he has to say even less, and we're less confident in his ability, and it makes people more angry. But he's not. Look, we just showed the re-election prospects for people with that level of approval rating. Like he's heading into this. He looks likely to lose. It's not like I'm holding on. I'm close enough. Let's just not let anything else go wrong. They have to try something.
I mean, to your comment about auto workers,
with those aides too.
To your comment about auto workers, I would push back there and say again. Like he said in the Capehart interview, he characterized it as kind of a youthful or left-oriented protest movement, the ceasefire movement. It's not. And I think the polls that I read about 83% of Democrats supporting a ceasefire with an exchange of the Israeli hostages, a release of the Israeli hostages, is on point. And I think as long as the Biden administration and Democrats continue to think this is a fringe problem of sorts, they're missing the meat of the issue. The UAW, as we covered on this show, endorsed a ceasefire back in, January, long before you were allowed to say something like this without getting condemned by a huge portion of elected Democrats as being, pro-Hamas, right? And remember that when Sean Fain eventually announced the endorsement, the UAW endorsement of Joe Biden, Biden was protested by UAW members at that very event when he was giving a speech over the issue of Gaza. Again, these are car manufacturers, adults, and hardly, left-wing fringe Oberlin kids protesting Joe Biden over this policy. So I do think this is something really core that's going to the heart of his pitch, which is he really the pro-democracy candidate when he seems to be so closely aligned with an administration that is acting in ways that are, according to many assessments, in contravention of various international laws?
Yeah, I don't know. I have some intrinsic skepticism that this is motivating a large share of voters. I think, obviously, I understand that it's making the progressives and the left activists and the college students and certain minority groups that pay a lot of attention to this issue are from the area. But
isn't that the entire Democratic coalition? Once you take out black voters,
maybe it is now. Maybe that's all.
But no, Robby, black voters, Latino voters, young voters. At what point have you just named every cohort of voters? Because black voters are also older voters. Latino voters have a range of ages and socioeconomic backgrounds as well. You cannot just reduce this down. And I think this is what the media in some ways has been trying to do, what mainstream media has been trying to do, to minimize the scale of this problem and to try to say that it's young people's fault if Biden doesn't win. But the more and more groups are implicated in this, yes, it does become, the Democratic coalition is a diverse coalition that's not just largely white males or white women of a certain socioeconomic bracket the way that Republicans are. It is a diverse
it's changing.
Coalition that's reflective of a diverse country. And you cannot lose huge swaths of your voting demographic as Democrats and just shrug your shoulders.
I agree. And Joe Biden is losing a huge swath of the country, but he needs to hold together what he had last election. He needs to keep enough moderate, independent, suburban, affluent white people in the coalition. And I think those people are most concerned about Biden's age and the economic situation. And none of it helps. He's in a bad situation because he is both losing ground with, there's a world in which, if he's actually so right-wing on Israel, he should be bringing right-wing people in or
But that's
something,
not how
and
it
that's
works.
not working. He's just losing.
It's not just not working. It never works. When there is a Democrat that tries to run to the right to court this fabled,
It's not true that it never works.
moderate.
John Fetterman has massively improved his favorability ratings in the last few weeks.
And are those people going to vote for John Fetterman over a Republican candidate in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania? No.
I think he
so
failed
you can
today.
get plaudits online if you care about Twitter buzz, but at the end of the day,
you care about your approval ratings.
Democrats
That's
don't
what we're talking
win.
about.
No, we're talking about Democrats being able to earn votes during the election. And I don't think that we see it over and over again. A Democrat says I'm going to be tough on crime, I'm going to be tough on immigration. Look what the Democratic Party is trying to do right now by trying to call Republicans bluff on an aggressive conservative immigration bill. Republicans say it's not conservative enough, even though it's largely what we were asking for all of last fall. And it has done nothing but turn off a bunch of liberals who thought the whole point of voting for Joe Biden was to get away from Trump's immigration policies. And all the Republicans are like, I don't care. It's too little too late. I don't really believe that you care about immigration. Moreover, why wouldn't I just vote for the Republican candidate who I trust on this issue and who has even more conservative plans for the border than you do? You can never out-Republican a Republican, and all Democrats do is in effect, alienate their base. And I think that's what's happening with Joe Biden right now. And I don't think that he's doing it because he thinks that there's some massive pro-Israel base that he needs to pander to. The polls suggest there isn't. And I think a lot of these pro-ceasefire people, they're not anti-Israel. They just want to stop seeing the carnage in Gaza.
I've seen polls that show people support a ceasefire if that means the defeat of Hamas. I've cited them on the show before.
Right.
So I don't know. Like, I want a ceasefire too, and then I want both sides to stop massacring each other. And do I count as a pro-ceasefire voice?
The point here, Robby, is that Joe Biden does not support a permanent ceasefire in any context. So whether or not you're talking about a poll that you like to cite or a poll that I like to cite, Joe Biden's not with either of those majorities in any of those polls because he at most supports like a 6-week ceasefire, and they haven't even managed to get that done.
All right, more Rising right after this.